Hello, and welcome to the Arbitration Conversation. So, as many of you know who've been watching the Arbitration Conversation, we are on our way to 100 episodes. And we have been sort of talking to leaders in arbitration for the last, up until now, 98 episodes. And we still have not had a chance to talk to Chris Poole. And I've been wanting to talk to Chris Poole, who is the CEO of JAMS. And we all know JAMS. JAMS is a very, very famous and one of the largest ADR providers in the country, and does a great deal with arbitration, mediation, and we are just truly happy and fortunate that we have you with us. So Chris Poole, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Amy, and congratulations on all your success.
So I guess I would love to start off because I think a lot of students would want to know, a lot of individuals who are interested in ADR, how does someone end up becoming the CEO of JAMS? So I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey to actually rising to this position, which is really amazing.
Well, it's a little bit accidental. I was first exposed to lawyers and law firms so many years ago, I'm not sure I want to say, but I actually started in the technology field. I worked for one of the few largest firms in the world and helped them set up a technology program. And then I ended up as their COO and learned a lot about the business of law. And then I swerved back towards technology into a legal software firm, and we sold that, and the JAMS people found me. So it was, I wasn't much of an expert by any stretch in mediation or arbitration, but I was used to dealing with lawyers and egos.
Yeah, I'll bet. And that's definitely something that happens at law firms. Yeah, and so you come to JAMS, and of course, there's been huge expansion. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit about what has happened and what you have done during your tenure, because it's really quite amazing in terms of the growth.
Yeah, well, it's actually been a lot of fun. This is a really special organization. A lot of places talk about their culture and so forth, and this place really lives it. So I've been here going on 14 years now. In fact, in about a week or two. So, but it was well established when I got here in 2007. It actually started way back in 1979 and kind of grew slowly and went through some very interesting growing pains. So I inherited something that was in pretty good shape, and it may sound a little funny, but I saw my main task as just to not mess it up.
Right. Well, clearly you did more than, you didn't just mess it up, but you did a lot of really different things. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about sort of in the last 5 to 10 years, what kind of advances and things that have been part of kind of your mission, more than just not messing it up, but really kind of what you've looked at and what has been important to you.
Yeah, no, you're right. The trick with a firm like this, and it's true for most, if not all ADR firms, is that neutrality is sort of the religion. And it means that it's harder, even if you wanted to branch out into other things, because a lot of them would present conflicts for your client base, just like you might see in a law firm. So our core mission has always been just to get stronger and stronger in arbitration and mediation. But we did grow up more as a mediation firm. Mm-hmm. It was pretty clear people thought of us as, a bunch of retired judges mediating cases. And if you fast forward to today, and this is very much on purpose, we have a really well-defined strategy, is that we're now about 50-50 arbitration and mediation. And in fact, arbitration for us is growing so fast that it's soon going to be more than half of what we do. So we were able to kind of stick to our core mission, but also expand. We've done geographic expansion. We have a much stronger presence, or at least recognition, outside of the United States. The amount of cross-border work we do has increased dramatically, and we're now in 28 cities in the US and London. So it's been a lot of fun.
What areas would you say are sort of have grown the most in terms of arbitration?
Yeah, sometimes I wish our systems were a little more specific about that. We have one main category that we call business commercial, and those are typically fairly large scale corporate disputes. The other largest area is employment of various kinds. Some of that's consumer, but it also includes some interesting things in, the entertainment industry, executive compensation, things of that nature. But that's grown at as fast a clip as anything else, and has become our second largest practice area.
That's interesting. Yeah, entertainment. I wouldn't have necessarily thought of that. We always think of I did construction law, so in my background, so I think about the usual suspects, but entertainment, interesting, that's
Yeah,
now
well, I
kind of
think part
separate.
of it is that we have such a strong presence in Southern California and also in
Yeah,
New York. And
right.
we've handled a lot of cases in the entertainment industry. And
Mhm.
for better, for worse, those are often about talent versus studio. So yeah, it's an interesting corner for us.
Yeah. I'm sure many students who are listening will think, oh, I want to do that. Those are the kind of the cool areas to go
I'm
into.
probably not supposed to do this, but I'll tell you a really quick story.
Oh, I
We
love
were,
stories.
I can only tell it because it ended up being public, but we had the Kardashians in our office one day, and all three of them decided to go into the bathroom at the same time, and somebody took a photo, and it ended up on, Instagram or Twitter or something. And all of a sudden we were getting all these messages like, hey, what's JAMS? Where is it? Let's go. They had no idea where these ladies were that day. But yeah, it's an interesting part of the business.
That's actually very funny. Suddenly you're the hit of TikTok or whatever people do nowadays. I don't even
Right.
know actually. So
Yeah.
speaking of technology, actually it's a good segue because, with the pandemic, obviously we had to move arbitrations online. How did JAMS approach that and how did it go?
It went really well. I think a lot of people had similar experiences, but we were, in general, just sort of scared stiff in March and April about what was going to happen. Our whole industry was still very, very much in person. And in fact, our business model revolved in part around our sort of premium office space and the service we can provide there, the personal service, and for better, for worse, the food. And people just really liked being there, and we were a little reluctant to go online, although we had developed already some very strong technology. So once we got into May and June, we did a pretty fast pivot. We were surprised at how successful our panel was, given their average age, in converting to the new technology. And now, of course, most of our offices are open, but we're still doing about 70% of our business not in person. So it went very, very well.
So that's really interesting. 70%. What do you think is going to be sort of how do you, when you read the tea leaves, do you think the 70% will remain or what do you think the future holds?
Everybody has their own predictions. I think the only thing that's certain is that this virtual world is going to stay here probably permanently. It's hard to peg whether that's 30% or 50% or 70%. I suspect, I know a lot of folks want to sort of get back into in-person stuff, but while we still have the pandemic out there and we're still arguing about vaccinations and all that kind of stuff, it's going to be slow. But at the same time, I know a lot of our clients in law firms in particular are very comfortable with this. And even, in our arbitration practice, what's interesting is that can be pretty complex with the cases we handle. They're often very large and they involve a lot of parties. And to pull that all together on something like Zoom is not trivial. But we've made it work. We've built out what most people would call Zoom rooms and our resolution centers, and we've hired additional staff. We have a whole new department of what we call virtual ADR managers, and they make sure that the white glove service we provide in person still applies online. So I don't know. I suspect if you and I were talking in 6 months, it's probably still going to be 60% not in person, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I'm one of those people who sort of predicted that this would happen regardless, just because of technology and its disruption. And you coming from the tech field, I'm sure you sort of wondered when this was going to happen as well, just because.
Yeah, well, it's been, I mean, we almost laugh at ourselves a little bit because on the what we call the associate side, our employees had for years been sort of asking for more flexibility and not coming into the office. And then, of course, all of a sudden that issue was forced. And it's not to say that everybody wants to work from home, but boy, I tell you, we were dragged into that in a hurry, but it's worked out really well.
Yeah, no, I bet. Absolutely. Well, and if you were to sort of make predictions, let's talk a little futuristic here. What do you think are going to be the biggest trends in 2022 and beyond?
It's kind of interesting for arbitration in particular because I think there's going to be a heavier cross-border content. The whole issue of globalization is something people can debate, but it's here and it's here big time, and there's a lot of trade issues in particular to resolve. And so that's been a fairly rapidly growing area for us. I think the technology will enable that and a lot of other things, so people don't have to get on airplanes to do it. There are some very interesting wild cards that usually come out of either Sacramento for us, although we are nationwide, or Washington. For example, the FAIR Act that was reintroduced again this year, and a lot of the sort of the welling up of concern about mandatory arbitration and class actions. Personally, I would predict that there will be more and more regulation around that, and that employees in particular will have more opportunities. It's been sort of a fascinating situation to watch where the plaintiff lawyers, of course, pretty quickly figured out that if they file 10,000 single arbitrations one day, that the defendants probably aren't really excited about paying all those filing fees. But we can't change it. We don't lean one way or the other. We're just playing it out and trying to obey the law. But I think the law is likely to change, and that'll have an effect. It may not have as big an effect as people think, because at the end of the day, you still want to get your issue resolved. Yeah. And a lot of time, although we love the court system and we need the court system, that can take a long time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Time is very important when it comes to all of this. That's interesting. Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of, changes, but then some things I think will never go away. I think there's certain aspects to arbitration and mediation that will probably remain pretty constant, but technology certainly will play a role in whatever we happen to see. And one more question I think that people often wonder with JAMS. So you said at the outset, we're not just a bunch of retired judges. So maybe you just want to explain a little bit about your panel and how one becomes an arbitrator with JAMS.
No, I appreciate that question. I think it's fair to say it's not easy. We like to think of ourselves as very selective. We're different than a lot of other organizations in that our panel is, the big difference is that our panel is full-time. So if they're arbitrating or mediating or whatever they do in dispute resolution, if they're on our panel, they're only doing it at JAMS. They're not doing it part-time. They're not practicing law, mostly because of the potential conflicts with our business there. So it's a little bit of a different model. They are independent contractors. We do still lean mostly towards retired judges, but that's become maybe 60% of our panel, where, of course, we started at 100%, and then we were at maybe 75 or 70% for a while. One of the other big changes is that we have a much bigger emphasis. It's not a new emphasis, but a bigger emphasis on diversity of all kinds. And including age. So that has taken to some very interesting places. We've started a fellowship program to offer special intense training for people to potentially be on the panel. But we still say no to probably 10 people for every one that ends up on the JAMS panel. So it's a model that works very well for us.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's interesting, and it's probably something not everybody realizes, about jams, and no, it's good information. So I promised I wouldn't take too much of your time. So are there any sort of last words, like if you were to offer some advice to aspiring arbitrators out there who hope to someday become on the JAMS panel? And I think about, a lot of times students will ask me, like, how do I ever aspire to, what advice would you give?
Well, I think there are a lot of different ways to get started. JAMS is not the only one that has a fellowship program, for example, and those aren't large programs, so they can't accommodate lots of people. But they're out there, and they're a good way to learn. Sometimes this may sound a little circuitous, but getting into dispute resolution through mediation, you can learn a lot in general about the process. You can shadow sometimes cases where if you know an arbitrator or mediator that's handling a case, they might get their clients to agree to have people sit in, and you learn a lot by doing that. So I think there are a lot of different ways. Arbitration's a little tougher in some ways than mediation. Mediation requires a lot of skill, but I think arbitration requires more experience. So it's a little circular in that it's hard to be a beginning arbitrator if, for example, you haven't already been practicing law for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, I really want to thank you so much for being part of the arbitration conversation. And thank you so much for taking time with me.
You bet. And congratulations to you again.